The Wuthering Waves version 2.1. Oh boy, this one has the internet split right down in the middle. On one side, people are calling it the most filler, most disappointing version in Renaissance. Granted, we've only had 2 versions so far, but still. And on the other side, some people are saying that this version was amazing, packed with new things and just an overall great experience. So which is it? Is this a fantastic version or is it just meh? That's exactly what we're going to break down in this video. But before we get into it, if you enjoy my content, make sure you drop a like and leave a comment. Did you love the version? Did you hate it? What worked? What didn't? I want to hear all of it. And of course, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a video. Alright, let's get into it. Now, when it comes to version 2.1, there's a lot to unpack. We're going to break it down piece by piece. What worked, what didn't, and whether this update was a step forward or back. First up, the story. This update gave us a couple of new storylines, but were they actually good? Did they elevate the original tone and direction of the Renaissance arc, or did they take a nosedive? We'll analyze that and see if Wuthering Waves is really improving in its storytelling or just throwing in content for the sake of it. Next, we have the fishing event, and here's the real question. Is fishing strong enough to stand as a full event on its own, or was this just a filler decision that didn't really add much to the game? Also, we'll take a look at the fishing mechanics. Were they engaging? Did they make fishing fun, or was it a tedious flop? Then we have the Hecate hologram event. This was one of the major highlights, but was it actually a good event? Did Hecate deliver a solid boss fight, or did it just feel like another forgettable challenge? We'll break that down, and of course, we have to talk about the endgame. Now, I know I've already made a video about this before, but after playing it for a few more weeks, I've got some new thoughts, some revisions, if you will. So we're going to revisit the endgame discussion and see if my opinion has changed. Finally, we'll touch on smaller events that came with this update. Did they actually improve the game? Were they fun? Or did they just exist to fill up content? We'll go over everything and see if version 2.1 was really worth the hype. Alright, let's start with the stories. First up, we have the region beneath the Alvarado Bank. Now, don't worry if you've not played it yet, I won't spoil anything major, but here's the basic setup. We find ourselves in this underground area and surprise surprise, someone is causing trouble. The main plot revolves around us chasing this individual down, trying to stop them from making things worse. But as we pursue them, we start uncovering lore about the people living under the Alvarado Bank. We learn how they're connected to both the Fasalias and the Montelli families, adding another layer to the political and social dynamics of Renaissance. But by the end of it, we save the day, things get resolved, and the story even impacts the environment itself, altering the geography of the map in a way that makes the world feel more alive or more dead, depending on who you ask. So was this a good story? Did they actually add depth to the world and characters, or was it just another generic mission? Now let me say this about the Wuthering Waves storytelling so far. The Renaissance story is, without a doubt, a massive improvement over the Huanglong story, and that is great. But if you've seen my video where I compared Wuthering Waves to AAA games, you remember that I didn't rank Renaissance story too high. Sure, compared to other gacha games, Renaissance story holds up pretty well, but as an experience on its own, right now, at this moment, it's just okay. I think I rated it around a 6 or 7, and honestly, nothing in this 2.1 quest really changes that. This story stays consistent to what Wuthering Waves has been doing so far. It's satisfactory but not memorable. In fact, when I sat down to talk about it, I actually had to rewatch parts of it because I barely remembered what happened. And that, I think, is the biggest issue with Renaissance's story so far. You finish it and you feel like, okay, this was solid, definitely an improvement, but there's nothing that sticks with you, nothing that sparks discussion, at least for me. There is no moment that makes me go, oh, do you remember that part? That was crazy. And the underground Alvarado Bank story, yeah, it really didn't change that. So overall, it's fine. If you're not going in with high expectations, you'll come out satisfied. But if you're hoping for something groundbreaking, you probably won't find it here. Alright, let's talk about the Hecate hologram fight. Now, I've heard some complaints about her. Not that she's difficult, but that she's just annoying. The main issue is that she targets blind spots. Unlike other bosses, her attacks come from angles that make it hard to react, which frustrates a lot of players. Now, personally, I haven't fought Hecate enough to develop any major gripes. I've taken her on at level 80 and so far, she doesn't feel much different from other hologram bosses to me. Holograms are designed to get harder as you progress, and trust me, me, I learned that the hard way with Inferno Rider. Beating the level 100 Inferno Rider was painful, but hey, it happened. And honestly, I have no complaints about the hologram system. In fact, I actually like it. I think it's one of the best ways to test your accounts. It pushes you to see how strong your characters really are and whether your builds hold up under pressure. So yeah, Hecate might be annoying, but I think that's just part of the challenge. Overall, the hologram event is solid, it does what it's supposed to do, and I'm here for it. Alright, let's go over all the events we've had so far. First up, the racing events. This event is super fun. I love it. It's a cool little activity you can do with friends, and it really takes advantage of the newer mechanics the game has introduced. And if I had to pick out a problem in this racing events, the only problem would be that it's way too short. Now, I understand that the game probably just wants to respect our time, or, there is so much you can do when you're just racing with people. But man, I really wish there was an option for longer races. Imagine a mode where you could do extended races with friends. That would be amazing. But yeah, outside of that, it's a great event, fun, engaging, and just a nice break from the usual grind. Next up, Tactical Simulacra. Now, I've heard mixed opinions on this, and to be fair, I used to dislike this one too. In one of my past videos, I even mentioned how the point system felt unfair and how the difficulty was way too high, but now it's too easy. And I know, I'm contradicting myself, like pick a lane, man, but I feel they swung too far in the opposite direction. The buffs they added were a great step forward. They made the event feel more fun and rewarding. But did they tone down enemy difficulty too much? Because I breezed through everything and it felt kind of dull. What I'd love to see is a middle ground. Keep the buffs, but make the enemies actually challenging. That way, it's not just a mindless button mashing session, but an actual test of skill. That said, I know for events like this, the main appeal is the rewards. So if I had to choose between making it too easy or too hard, I'd always pick easier. Still, I'd wish they'd tweak the balance just a little so it's both fun and challenging. Alright, so the most recent events, the Infinite Battle Simulacra, isn't really all that different from what we've had before. By now, I would have expected some kind of tweak or change, but honestly, I'm not mad about it. It's just a quick event, you hop in, you get your rewards, you move on. Nothing super exciting, but also nothing that feels like a chore. And really, that's what makes these events worth doing, the rewards. As long as it's not too boring and gives you something to work towards, it's fine. Now, before jumping into the fishing segments, which let's be honest is probably the highlight of the 2.1 events, let's talk about Brant's story. Now, without spoiling too much, Brant's story is basically a classic pirate adventure. You're on a treasure hunt guided by a special coin, but you're not the only one after the prize. A rival pirate is also in the race. So you and Brant embark on this journey to uncover a legendary treasure, and along the way you learn a valuable lesson. The story itself, it's okay. Just like most Wuthering Waves story, it follows the same trend. Not particularly exciting, but decent enough to feel satisfying. It's not groundbreaking, it's not super memorable, but it's also not bad. You go through it, you finish it, and you feel like, yeah, that was alright. All in all, the events and Brant's story were good. Not mind-blowing, not revolutionary, but solid enough to be worth playing. Alright, let's talk about the real highlight of version 2.1 events, the fishing event. So, the fishing event is actually split into two parts, the event itself and the accompanying story. Now, I'm assuming that most people watching this video have already done the story, but in case you haven't, I won't spoil too much. What I can say is that the story takes place around the Tidebreaker, and it revolves around you teaming up with Phoebe to catch fish, build a boat, and ultimately save the Tidebreaker's life. It's a nice little adventure and everything wraps up just fine. Now, this is where things get interesting because the fishing itself has been the real talking point of this event. I've seen a lot of people say that this is the best fishing system they've ever seen in a game. Some are absolutely loving it, saying it's fun, well designed, and engaging. But to me, I gotta be real with you, I think it's boring. And look, this is just my opinion. If you love the fishing event, that's fine. If you agree with me, that's also fine. But for me, this event is a drag. I haven't even finished it, and to be honest, I don't intend to. And that's crazy because I'm a free-to-play player. I need every single astride I can get, especially because before writing the script, I lost my 50-50 and got Verena instead of Brant, and yeah, I was pissed. So trust me when I say I need these rewards, but even knowing that, I still don't want to do this event. That's how much I don't enjoy it. And here's the thing, I personally don't think any game can make fishing truly exciting. Maybe a fishing simulator could work, but that's for a niche audience. In a game like Wuthering Waves, fishing should be nothing more than a minigame. But making fishing the main events, I get why they wanted to do something different, but this is not it for me. But let's actually break down how the fishing works. Alright, so when you hear fishing in a video game, you probably already have an image in your head, right? You get a fishing rod, you find a nice body of water, you cast your line and wait. Maybe there's a little timing mini game involved, maybe there's some rare fish to collect, but at its core, it's usually pretty simple. That's exactly what I expected when I heard that Wuthering Waves was doing a fishing event. I figured, okay, I'll just cast my line, catch a few fish and move on, but no, Wuthering Waves had other plans, and you know what? I respect it. I might not love the event, but I can at least appreciate that they tried something different. Instead of just giving you a fishing rod and calling it a day, they made it an actual process. First, you're controlling the gondola, gliding over the water to find the right fishing spots. Then, when you reach the area, you have to play a mini game to actually catch the fish. But here's the kicker. You can't just grab whatever fish you want and call it a day. There is an entire system where you have to carefully arrange your fish within a specific space, almost like a puzzle. You need to think about what fish you're catching, how big they are, and whether they even fit into your available area. It's not just about grabbing the biggest, rarest fish, it's about managing space efficiently. And then they added another layer. Normally, in fishing systems, you catch a fish, you haul them back to the shore and sell them. But in this event, if you arrange your fish properly within certain designated spots, you can sell them immediately while still on the water. That's a cool little touch. It keeps things flowing and removes the extra step of always having to return to the shore. Now, let me make one thing clear. I don't think this event is bad. I know some people absolutely love it and I can see why. The mechanics are well designed, the system works, and it's probably the most effort I've seen put into making fishing actually engaging. I'll give credit where credit is due. If you're someone who enjoyed this kinds of gameplay, this is probably one of the best fishing experiences you'll get in a gacha game. But here's my problem. I don't care how good the fishing is, I just don't think fishing should be the centerpiece of an entire event. If this were just a fun side activity, something optional you could do for some extra rewards, I wouldn't mind. I might even enjoy it in small doses. But when I heard that the major event of this version was going to revolve around fishing, I already knew I wasn't going to like it. I play Wuthering Waves for exploration, combat, cool characters. Fishing is just not something I want to spend a whole event grinding. So overall, solid implementation, good mechanics, probably the best fishing system they could have made, but as the main focus of the version, nah, I just don't think fishing is exciting enough to justify that. If you love it, great, but personally I was bored out of my mind. Alright, let's talk about the endgame content in Wuthering Waves because I have some thoughts, especially about the Whimpering Waste and weekly events. Now, I've made a video about this before, I've ranted, I've analyzed, I've even tried to be a little optimistic, but after spending more time with this, yeah, I still have some things to say. Now let's talk about the time constraints in Whimpering Waste. In my previous video, I mentioned that these constraints made the event tedious, and let me be clear, I still 100% stand by that. I do not enjoy how this event is structured around a ticking clock. It makes no sense. We already have a ticking clock in the Tower of Adversity, so I would think that if another endgame were implemented, you would make it its own thing, its own set of rules, and remove the limitations that other endgames suffer from. Now, one thing I would take back from my previous video is my stance on difficulty. Before I said that the time limits made the events inherently harder, but after playing it for a couple more weeks, I realized something. The actual strategy here is gathering enemies together and hitting them all at once. That's the key. Once you manage to do that, things get a lot easier. But here's the problem. Gathering enemies is a challenge in and of itself. It's clunky, frustrating, and half the time, the AI is just standing there like it forgot it was in a combat game. So sure, once you herd all the enemies into one spot, things flow better, but getting to that point is a mess. And even if the enemy grouping mechanics work perfectly, that still wouldn't save Whimpering Waste from its biggest flaw. It's just boring. There is no variation between levels, and yeah, you are giving buffs, but that's not enough to shake things up, not enough to keep the gameplay fresh. You load in, you fight the same waves of enemies, and you repeat over and over. It's uninspired, it's monotonous, and worst of all, it's tedious. When you add that tedium to the frustrating mechanics, it becomes something I actively do not like doing. And to be honest, the only reason I'm still doing this event is because the rewards are actually decent. If the rewards were mid, yeah, I'd be scared skipping this entirely. That's how much I dislike it. Crow needs to take a step back and reevaluate this event, because as it stands, it's not fun, it's not engaging, and unless something changes, it's an endgame mode that I'll be avoiding as much as possible. Now, onto the weekly events, and let me just say, I've heard a lot of mixed opinions on this one. Some people think it's straight up trash, way too easy, no challenge, not worth the time. Others actually enjoy it and think it's a solid addition. Personally, I'm in the it's okay camp. First off, I think people need to understand what this event is supposed to be. Right now, it's not meant to be a major endgame mode, it's more of a temporary solution for the lack of elusive realm. Since this mode is under development, this is something to keep us occupied in the meantime. And when I first heard that it would run every week and only reward 150 astrites, I already had an idea what to expect, and honestly, this event delivered exactly that. Nothing groundbreaking, but nothing terrible either. It's super easy. First of all, the buffs you get make enemies feel like paper. You just stream roll through everything, but I think that's kind of the point. This isn't meant to be some hardcore skill test. It's a quick and casual way to earn extra astrites, and for that, it does its job just fine. Not every event needs to be a brutal challenge. Sometimes it's nice to just hop in, clear a few rewards, and move on. Now, that being said, could it be better? Absolutely. I think there's a lot of room for improvement, and I'd be the first to advocate for changes. Right now, it feels like a watered down version of the elusive realm, and that's not ideal. It should have its own identity, something that makes it feel distinct rather than just a placeholder. I believe that when the elusive realm finally comes back, the weekly events could and should evolve to its own separate things with unique mechanics and rewards. So overall, I like the weekly events for what it is. It's a quick, easy way to get astrites, and it doesn't overstay its welcome. But I really hope Kuro builds on it and give it more depth over time. Right now, it's fine, but with a few tweaks, it could be something much better. So, how do I feel about version 2.1? How does this Woo update stack up? If I had to rate it, I'd give it a 7.5 out of 10, which for a filler version is actually pretty solid. Typically, filler updates don't do much for the overall story, and this one is no exception. But that's fine, because the real heavy-hitting content, the fights with Cathartia, the whole thing surrounding Cantarella, and all the major story beats are what's coming next. That's when we'll really see what Wu's story has to offer. I'm not judging the long-term narrative based on this version, because the real test is yet to come. But as for this update, it's good. It introduces 2 new endgame modes, and while they weren't perfect, the fact that we're even getting multiple endgame features this early on is a great sign. I really like the weekly events, and while I'm not a fan of Whimpering Race, it still had rewards and something new to do. Overall, if this is what we can expect from filler versions going forward, I will not be mad. It is solid updates, not groundbreaking, but definitely one of the better filler versions we've had. But that's just my take. What do you think? Did this version live up to your expectations? What did you love about it? What didn't you like? Was it worth your time, or did you think they could have done more? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and as always, I'll catch you in the next one.